The day the tornado hit, I was at work, my mind buried in mundane tasks, unaware of the chaos brewing at home. It was a typical spring day in our small town, the kind where the weather can't decide between sunshine and storms. When my phone rang, displaying my neighbor's number, I felt a spike of unease. "Emily, you need to come home now," her voice trembled. "It's your house, the tornado." My heart sank. I rushed through the emptying streets, the sky a menacing shade of gray. Turning onto our street was like entering a nightmare. Trees uprooted, power lines down, our neighborhood looked like a war zone. And there, standing defiant yet wounded, was our home. The sight of it brought a lump to my throat. Windows shattered, the roof partially torn off, our beloved home was a shell of its former self. But it was still standing. That was something. Thankfully, no one was home when the tornado struck. My husband, Mark, and our 2 kids were safe, which was all that truly mattered. But as we stood there, surveying the damage, I felt a sense of loss for the life we had built within those walls. We spent the next few hours salvaging what we could. Our neighbors, true to the spirit of our tight-knit community, rallied around us, offering help and support. In the midst of this chaos, there was a sense of unity, a shared resolve to rebuild not just our home, but our lives. That evening, we found temporary refuge at my sister's house. Exhausted, I finally had a moment to sit down and check my phone. It buzzed relentlessly with messages and missed calls. As I scrolled through, one particular notification caught my eye. It was a Facebook post from my mother-in-law, Linda. The post was dramatic, to say the least, claiming our house was completely destroyed. I felt a surge of irritation. Linda had had a penchant for exaggeration, especially on social media, but this was a new low, even for her. "Can you believe this?" I showed the post to Mark, who let out a weary sigh. "She just doesn't get it," he said, his voice a mix of anger and resignation. "She knows I hate it when she posts about our personal life." The post had already gathered a string of comments, people expressing shock and sorrow, offering prayers and help. It was a kind gesture from the community, but based on false pretenses. I wanted to correct the post, to set the record straight, but Mark placed a hand on my shoulder. "Let's just deal with it tomorrow," he said. "We've got enough on our plate right now." He was right, of course. But as I lay in bed that night, unable to sleep, I couldn't shake off a growing sense of anger. Linda's actions, though perhaps well-intentioned, had crossed a line, and I was determined to make her understand that. The morning light did little to ease the heaviness in my heart. As I scrolled through the endless messages on my phone, Linda's post from last night glared back at me, a stark reminder of the unwanted drama unfolding alongside our real crisis. Sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, I pondered my next move. Mark, ever the peacemaker, suggested letting it go, focusing on our immediate needs instead. But the more I thought about it, the more Linda's actions bothered me. It wasn't just about the post. It was about respect, privacy, and understanding boundaries. I decided to call Linda, hoping a direct conversation might resolve the issue. The phone rang, and after a couple of tones, her cheerful voice filled the line. "Emily, darling, how are you holding up? I've been so worried." "Linda, we need to talk about your Facebook post," I said, cutting to the chase. There was a pause on the other end. "Oh, that," she replied, her tone shifting. "I was just trying to let our friends and family know what happened. Gather some support for you all." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my frustration in check. "Linda, our house wasn't destroyed. It's badly damaged, yes, but your post is misleading, and Mark specifically dislikes personal matters being shared on social media." There was another pause, longer this time. "Well, I didn't mean any harm," she said defensively. "I just wanted to help." I softened my tone. "I appreciate that, Linda, but this isn't the way. Can you please correct the post? People are worried unnecessarily." There was a reluctant murmur of agreement from her before we ended the call. I felt a small victory, but the irritation lingered. I couldn't shake off the feeling that Linda's actions were more about garnering attention for herself than genuinely helping us. The rest of the day was a blur of phone calls and arrangements, insurance agents, contractors, family members offering help. In the midst of it all, I kept thinking about Linda and the impact of her thoughtlessness. It was a small part of a much larger problem, but it felt symbolic of the lack of understanding and respect that had always tinged our relationship. That evening, as we gathered at my sister's house for a makeshift dinner, the conversation inevitably turned to the Facebook fiasco. My sister, always the outspoken one, didn't mince words. "You should give her a taste of her own medicine," she said, half joking. "See how she likes it when her personal business is all over the internet." Her words, meant in jest, sparked an idea in my mind. A plan began to form, one that would teach Linda a lesson in a way she wouldn't expect. It was risky, potentially petty, but at that moment, it felt like the perfect response to an ongoing problem. The next day dawned with a sense of purpose for me. As I surveyed the damage to our home once more, I couldn't help but think about the unnecessary chaos Linda's post had caused. The more I reflected on it, the more it felt like a symptom of a much larger issue in our relationship with her. She often overstepped boundaries without considering the consequences, and this time I was determined to make her realize the impact of her actions. Meanwhile, the ripple effect of Linda's exaggerated post continued. Mark's aunt, who had taken the post at face value, had shared her own version of the story, further distorting the truth. This led to a cascade of concerned calls and messages, adding to our already overwhelming situation. Mark, seeing the stress it was causing, finally agreed that something needed to be done. "I just don't understand why she always has to make things about her," he said, frustration evident in his voice. As we sat in the living room of my sister's house, surrounded by a few salvaged belongings, the reality of our situation hit me. We were in the middle of a crisis, yet part of our energy was being drained by a needless social media drama. That evening, I started to put my plan into action. It was simple, yet effective. I would give Linda a taste of her own medicine by sharing a post about her on Facebook. But not just any post. It would be a carefully crafted story, exaggerated just enough to make a point, yet harmless enough not to cause real damage. I spent some time composing the post, ensuring it was just right. "Feeling grateful for Linda," I began, "who bravely saved a stray cat during the storm and is now nursing it back to health at home." It was a complete fabrication, of course, but plausible enough to be believed. I hesitated for a moment before hitting post. This was not my usual style, but desperate times called for desperate measures. I thought about the stress her post had caused us, and with a mix of apprehension and determination, I shared the story. Within minutes, the post started to gain traction. Comments poured in, praising Linda's heroism and kindness. I watched as the notifications flooded in, a part of me feeling guilty for stooping to her level, yet another part feeling a sense of vindication. The following day, Linda called, flustered and overwhelmed by the attention the post had garnered. "Emily, I don't know what to do. Everyone is asking about this cat, and I don't even have one." I tried to keep my voice steady. "It's overwhelming when people share things about you on social media, isn't it?" There was a long pause on the other end. I see your point," she finally said, her voice a mixture of embarrassment and realization. It was a small victory, but an important one. Linda had finally experienced firsthand the impact of her actions. It was a lesson in empathy, delivered through the very medium she couldn't resist. The aftermath of my Facebook post was immediate and revealing. The phone call with Linda had ended on an awkward note, but it sparked a necessary conversation. Later that day, she came over to my sister's house, a rare gesture of humility in her eyes. "I didn't realize how my actions affected you and Mark," Linda began, her usual confident demeanor replaced by a hint of vulnerability. "I never intended to cause you more stress." I appreciated her effort to understand, but years of accumulated frustration bubbled to the surface. "Linda, it's not just about the post. It's about respecting our privacy. Mark has told you many times he doesn't like personal things shared on social media." Linda nodded, looking genuinely remorseful. "I guess I got carried away with wanting to be a part of everything. I didn't think about the consequences." The conversation that followed was long overdue. We talked about boundaries, respect, and the importance of communication. For the first time, I felt like Linda was truly listening, not just hearing what she wanted to. Mark joined us, and together, we began to untangle the complicated web of our family dynamics. It was a difficult conversation, filled with moments of tension and relief, but it was necessary, a step towards understanding and healing. As Linda left, she turned to me. Thank you for the eye-opener, Emily. I promise to be more thoughtful in the future. The confrontation had been cathartic, but it left me with mixed feelings. My plan had worked, but I couldn't shake off the guilt of using deception, even if it was for a good cause. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. We began the arduous process of repairing our home, buoyed by the support of our community. The initial shock had worn off, replaced by a sense of purpose and determination. In the midst of the chaos, I often found myself reflecting on the confrontation with Linda. It had been a turning point, not just in our relationship with her, but in how I viewed conflicts and resolutions. I realized that sometimes it takes a drastic measure to bring about change, but the real challenge lies in handling the consequences with grace and understanding. As we slowly put our home and lives back together, I felt a newfound sense of resilience. The tornado had taken much from us, but it had also given us something unexpected, a chance to rebuild, not just our house, but our relationships and ourselves. In the days following the confrontation with Linda, there was a palpable shift in our family dynamics. The air was clearer, albeit still tinged with the remnants of past grievances. Linda's visits became more considerate, and our conversations more meaningful. Yet a part of me remained wary, unconvinced that old habits could change so quickly. As we navigated through the complexities of rebuilding our home, I found myself mulling over the effectiveness of my little plot. It was a tactic I was not proud of, but it had sparked a necessary change. This realization led me to reflect on the concept of revenge. Was it always a negative impulse, or could it, in some contexts, be a catalyst for positive change? I discussed these thoughts with Mark one evening as we sat amidst boxes of salvaged belongings at my sister's house. I keep thinking about what I did with that Facebook post, I admitted. Part of me feels guilty, but another part feels like it was the only way to get through to your mom. Mark took my hand, his eyes understanding. I know it wasn't easy for you, but it did make a difference. Sometimes we need to shake things up to make people see things differently. Encouraged by his words, I started to view my actions in a different light. Revenge, in its many forms, is often seen as a petty or destructive force. But in this case, it had served as a mirror, reflecting the consequences of one's actions back at them. This perspective became a source of strength for me. As we worked through the endless tasks of restoration and dealing with insurance claims, I found a newfound assertiveness. I was no longer hesitant to speak my mind, especially when it came to decisions about our home and family. Linda, for her part, seemed to have taken the lesson to heart. Her interactions with us became more thoughtful, and she was noticeably more restrained on social media. It was a small, yet significant change, one that improved the overall atmosphere whenever we gathered as a family. During this period, I also learned the importance of forgiveness. Holding on to anger and resentment was like carrying a heavy burden, that one that I no longer wished to bear. Forgiving Linda did not mean forgetting what had happened, but it allowed me to move forward without the weight of past conflicts. As our home slowly came back to life, so did our spirits. The process of rebuilding was not just about repairing walls and roofs, but about mending relationships and redefining boundaries. The storm had brought destruction, but in its wake it left room for growth and renewal. The reconstruction of our home progressed steadily, a tangible symbol of our family's resilience. With each repaired wall and repainted room, I felt a sense of accomplishment and hope. This period of rebuilding was not just physical, it was emotional and relational as well. My plan, which had initially been born out of frustration and a desire for revenge, had unexpectedly opened a path to healing and understanding. Linda's transformation, though gradual, was evident. She became more mindful of her words and actions, showing a level of consideration that was previously absent. One weekend, as we were unpacking some boxes in the newly restored living room, Linda dropped by, unannounced yet welcome. She came bearing a homemade cake, a small but significant gesture. We sat around the kitchen table, savoring the cake and the comfort of easy conversation. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened," Linda began, her tone reflective. "I realize now how much I've overstepped in the past. I'm sorry for the stress I caused you both." Her apology was sincere, and I felt a wave of relief wash over me. It was the closure I hadn't realized I needed. "Thank you, Linda. I said, meaning every word. "It means a lot to us." As we talked, I saw a new side of Linda. She listened more than she spoke, her responses thoughtful and considerate. It was a stark contrast to the Linda I had known, the one who always seemed to be at the center of every conversation. This change in Linda had a ripple effect on our family dynamics. Mark and I found ourselves looking forward to her visits, appreciating her efforts to be a better mother and mother-in-law. Our conversations delved deeper, moving beyond surface-level pleasantries to genuine discussions about life, dreams, and fears. In these moments, I realized the power of communication and empathy. My initial plan, conceived in a moment of frustration, had unknowingly paved the way for a deeper connection. It was a reminder that sometimes the most challenging situations can lead to the most profound transformations. As our home neared completion, so did our journey of reconciliation and understanding. The experience had taught us the value of patience, forgiveness, and the strength of family bonds. We had weathered the storm, both literal and metaphorical, emerging stronger and more united. With our home fully restored and our family relationships on a new, healthier trajectory, I took a moment to reflect on the journey we had undergone. The once damaged walls of our home now stood strong and vibrant, echoing the transformation within our family. Linda's evolution was the most remarkable. The once overbearing and intrusive mother-in-law had become a thoughtful and considerate part of our lives. Her change was not just in her actions, but in her understanding of us as a family. She respected our boundaries and became an integral, positive force in our lives. This transformation was not lost on our extended family and friends. They noticed the change in dynamics, often commenting on the newfound harmony at family gatherings. It was a testament to the power of communication and the willingness to change. As for me, the entire ordeal had been a profound learning experience. I had confronted a challenging situation with a plan that, in retrospect, was risky and could have backfired. But it had led to a positive outcome, teaching me the importance of standing up for what I believed was right, albeit in a non-conventional way. I shared these reflections with Mark one evening as we sat in our rejuvenated living room. "I never thought that a plan born out of frustration would lead to such a positive change," I mused. Mark smiled, taking my hand. "Sometimes it's the unexpected paths that lead us to the best destinations. I'm just glad we've come out of this stronger as a family." The incident with the tornado and the subsequent fallout with Linda had brought us closer together. It had shown us the strength of our bond, the resilience of our family, and the transformative power of empathy and understanding. Our home, once a symbol of loss and chaos, had become a haven of love and unity. It stood as a reminder that out of destruction can come growth, and out of conflict can come harmony. We had not only rebuilt our home, but had also restructured our family dynamics into something stronger and more meaningful. As I looked around at the walls that had witnessed so much, I felt a deep sense of peace and gratitude. We had weathered the storm, and in its wake, we found a deeper appreciation for each other and the home we shared.